Other requests, just give it to Roy. And we'll try to, if we have any ability to research it or put it together, we'll try to work on it. So anyway, it was on GPS. So, which is, to me, a very important thing in our life. All the satellites up there are important. All of our TV comes down from satellites. All of our cell phone technology. You want to talk to somebody in Europe, anyway, they're all satellites up there. This one has to do with basically, most of us aren't a lot concerned about it, but the world is what you call navigation. Where are you at in this world and where do you want to go? And therefore, how you're going to get there. So the bottom line is, as we talked last year, we've gone over several different concepts, and what I try to do is weave them together. So in this case, we're going to try to weave together some things from before, so hopefully you either have previous knowledge or we talked about it before to some extent. So my expertise, I always try to give some credentials so you know that hopefully I know a little bit of what I'm talking about. My expertise in this field started a long time ago, what we call navigation. And anybody who's in the Army, I don't know about the Air Force and the Navy, but if you were in the Army, in basic training we all went through. When I was in basic training in California, for example, they call it map reading. And you've got to learn how to read a map. And they give you a compass. And a lot of people haven't seen compasses, but anyway, I still carry one around with me. Here's a compass. So we used to have them on cars years ago, if people remember. But anyway, what they did as a test, and so you really had to learn it. At the end of the course in map reading, they put us out in the mountains of California at night, complete dark, and they gave you a compass and a flashlight, and they told you where you had to go. So you have to go here, you have to go there, you have to go there, you have to go there, and so on. So the bottom line is 11 o'clock at night, you have to be here. So to get there, you have to go to all the points. So very well designed. And at 11 o'clock at night, talk about it being in the mountains, a training place in California. You're far away from anything. So anyway, at 11 o'clock at night, you were supposed to be at that point. And if you did, at that point they turned on all the car lights, the truck lights, and so on. So if you were anywhere close, you could find it. If you weren't close, I don't know what they would have done, but I guess you would have stayed out in the mountains overnight until morning until somebody could find you. But at home, the basic training found their way there. They didn't all get there by the map. If you're in a big area and it's really dark, any lights at all, you'll find and so on. But anyway, the bottom line is you're out there in the middle of nowhere, no lights, nothing to guide you other than the stars and your compass and so on. And there's all kinds of animals out there, there's snakes out there and so on. So we were extremely diligent in wanting to get back home by 11 o'clock. So anyway, that was my first experience in map reading, and it was mandatory. So my next experience was, for whatever reason, I got in the engineer corps of the Army through Officer Candidate School. So when I came back from Korea after 4 years as an engineer officer, in my hometown, there's a place called Moosehart. I don't know if you've heard of Moosehart, but there's Moose Lodge here in Killeen. So like the Elks and all these lodges, Moosehart is what they call Child City. So it's like from an orphanage per se, except it's a different kind of orphanage. So if you're a Moose member, your wife died or the husband died, you can send your child there to grow up. So on. It's a child city. It was run by the Moose. And they grew up in like barracks. In other words, they had a house and a house mother. So a little more like a fraternity type thing. Anyway, back then the Army was starting a program. They wanted a lot of people in the reserve, and I was in the reserve. I got out of the Army and I was going to college. So they asked me to become the commanding officer of this small unit. And that they were all juniors and seniors in high school. So basically, if they joined, then they'd have to go in for 6 months when they graduated from high school, then spend the next probably 6, 7 years, I don't remember exactly, in the reserve. If the reserve got called up, they would have to go with it. So that was what they called the Army Reserve, something like the National Guard, but the National Guard belongs to the state, the reserve belongs to the Army. Anyway, for whatever reason, it ended up being what we call an engineered topographic unit. That's a unit that makes maps. So their job is, there's no map when they're over there in the forest in Germany. It's a topographic unit to find the maps or to make maps or steal them from the enemy or whatever. Topographic. So we had a 3/4-ton truck, a couple of them. And on one of them they had a photography lab. So that's one of the ways they got into photography. The other, they had a offset printing press back then. The printing was done with a type of printing like this here. Quite a bit different than what we're doing now with laser printing. And so on. So that's basically, other than learning to shoot and march and so on, this is what I was teaching the high school students, to teach them photography and map reading, map making per se, and then how to work this offset printing press. And so anyway, then I went to, or in the Army, I went to flight school down here at Gary Air Force Base to learn to fly Cessna 180. And then I was exposed to aeronautical maps, and I've got one there to show you aeronautical maps. So in navigation, you have to navigate by maps of the sea, so that's in the air. Aviation maps are different than land maps. Land maps are different than sea maps. Sea maps, you be more concerned with where the buoy is, where the lighthouse is, where the whatever the ships run into. I can't think of the term. Reefs, yeah, reefs and so on. So, whereas in the air, you're concerned about the telephone poles that go up, the antennas and so on. On land, you're concerned about other things. So each type of map has got different technology to it. So most of that all led to, over a period of time, to now what we call GPS. So GPS is Global Positioning Satellites. So first thing you have to know when you get into this world of navigation and learning the world, you've got to learn the degrees of longitude and latitude. Okay? 0 is at the equator, and then you go up to 90. 0 to the North Pole is 90, plus 90. 0 to the South Pole on a lot of things is minus 90. So depending on what kind of map, what kind of system you're using, in our world it'd be considered pluses, and in the astronomy world, if you're going down to the South Pole, it'd be considered minus 90. So the same thing is. And then you have to get in your head when you think about longitude and latitude, something that gives you a reference. Well, you got the reference, the equator is 0, and up here at 90, but you got to have some reference in between under the number 3 concept of working. So I use, because I was in the Korean War in Korea, the 38th parallel. 38th parallel of where we bargained with North Korea, South Korea, whatever, where we drew the line. So the 38th parallel at a certain place, and therefore, as you go around the world, I kind of relate what that's equivalent to. Maybe Chicago, Denver, Colorado, whatever. So once you get that, you kind of know the climate's going to be. Down at the equator, you know it's going to be hot. No snow, never going to be cold, and so on. So as you go up higher, it's going to get very, very cold up here. And then when we get into the next session on this, we'll go into some of the reasons why we have seasons. That's all based on what we're going to talk about here. Then, for whatever reason, England ruled the seas a long time ago. So 0, what we call Zulu time, 0 time, Greenwich Village time, or Universal Standard Time, that is in England right outside of, close, I guess, to London, Greenwich Village, and that's where 0 time starts. So you go through 0 time around the world, 24 hours. So there's 0, 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hours, so on. So the bottom line is, you kind of have to know, once you're going to work with any of this for whatever reason, where you are at in the world. So that's kind of what we'll cover. So let's go over this chart here first. Where did I put my... Everybody looking at this one? So here is the world, okay? The Earth, North Pole, South Pole, so east, west, and so on. And what we're talking about now is in the drone world, where a lot of this knowledge is being used, and what will lead up to probably as we go, is the air above us. The air above us, the drone world, or unmanned vehicles, can go up to 400 feet above there. 400 feet above us now. The problem with 400 feet is that, for example, you might have a mountain there. So 400 feet is different here than there. So your devices have to take all this into account. If a drone is going to fly over here and it's doing imaging type work, here the floor would be down there. So 400 feet here is going to be different. So the drone has to calculate, I'm now over this here, but you want me to stay here. Okay? So we go by sea level, which is Houston, Panama, where I was at for 5 years, you're down at sea level. When I was stationed in the Army in Denver, Colorado, and El Paso, we're a mile high. So you're a mile high. So above that mile high, 400 feet, is where the drones can fly. Okay? So the airspace belongs to somebody. The ocean belongs to somebody. Some belongs to a country, some belongs to international law, and so on. So if you look at your chart there, you'll see the closest cycles we've got. This is one, this is the other. This is the International Space Station. Okay? And interesting right now, in the International Space Station, we have a Chilean native up there in it. So a lot of people don't know that, and in my opinion, they should. They actually sent a Christmas message, and I would think that some Korean people, Chilean people, would be interested in hearing what he had to say. Anyway, he's a commander of the flight, if I remember right. So on your chart there, you have the International Space Station, and then you have the Hubble. That's the Hubble telescope. So almost all the beautiful pictures that you see of the stars in astronomy, almost all of them come from the Hubble. That's the space station telescope that we put above anything that's going to cause problems for us to see. So what they call in astronomy, the seeing is absolutely great up there. The seeing down here, being able to see, depends on dust in the sky, it depends on weather, all kinds of things, and so on. So the Hubble is there to take pictures of the heavens for us. That's fairly close to near Earth. And then the next step that I had when I got into this world, when I retired in '86, was a satellite world. So I had a 15-foot satellite on the back of my house. These are, I'm sure you know, like this here, concave. So the signal comes in, and this big thing picks up that very weak signal and pushes it to a little tiny receiver here. And on my motorhome, I had a 9-foot satellite. So on my motorhome, the satellite was exactly the same and it's having to find stuff in the sky with a telescope, at AZ, azimuth, elevation, and so on. So you have to know the same thing we're talking about here, but now GPS is doing it for us. So if you don't know, let's say this is the United States, Florida, Gulf of Mexico, Atlantic Ocean, Pacific, Alaska up here, Canada, so on, so USA. 23,000 miles above us. So if you look here, there's kilometers, and down underneath, there's miles. 23,000 miles up here are what they call geosynchronous satellites. Geosynchronous. What that means is, this is the East Coast, West Coast. A satellite up here, is going to be there all the time. So as the Earth turns, they turn in synchronous with the Earth. So they're what they call geosynchronous. At the same time, if you remember Sputnik, anybody remember Sputnik? It's a Russian satellite. The Russian satellite would come up over the United States. This was their spy satellite back then in the 80s. Go up to Alaska, turn around, go back down, and I'm not sure where it went, South America, make a figure 8. So that was all that satellite did. Primarily, in our opinion, to look at the United States, but it was constantly going over the United States. So you could track it, like now you can track ISIS. I have a thing on my cell phone, and I know exactly when it's going to be overhit here, based on all this here. So those are geosynchronous ones. So if you look there on the chart, I presume this is accurate.